So today I have the Furibee Fuuton 200 from Gearbest. It's an X-frame style racing FPV quadcopter. I'm going to show you how to configure your Taranis, FrSky Taranis, for use with this quadcopter. We're going to set up 3 flight modes: horizon mode, stability mode or angle mode, and Acro mode. We're going to set up a timer, and we're going to set up a timer reset button, as well as an arm and disarm switch. So we're going to set up all that step by step, page by page in the Taranis. This is my completed Furibee Fuuton profile. As you can see, I have all of the configuration done already.
Horizon mode, Acro mode.
This switch here switches my modes.
Mode.
This switch here
Off.
will power it on and off. That's my timer reset, and this is my beeper, actually, for lost model alarm. So, let's start setting this up fresh from scratch. Let's say you have an empty Taranis and you don't have this set up. So I'm going to go to the menu. I'm going to go to an open model. Let's do this and go to create model. I'm going to create model on number 9. Alright, so now we're going to use the selection button to pick quadcopter, page, 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 and a long press to confirm. So now we have a new model created in the Taranis, and now we're going to click, now we know it's selected by the asterisk. Now we're going to hit page. So this is the first page of the model setup. This is where we're going to configure our timers, our radio failsafe settings, and the name of the model. So to browse the name, for the lettering, you just use these buttons and hold down a long press for an uppercase. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this real quick because this is boring. Alright, so with the name configured, now we can set up some timers. I want to set up the 3-minute timer that I have set for this model. So we're going to choose the percentage-based throttle control for the timer, and that will make it so that way, depending on where your throttle is, it'll slow the timer's descent based on where your throttle is. So if your throttle is lower, it'll make it a little slower. That's to get a more accurate idea of when your time is up. Alright, so now we'll go down a little bit more. I'm going to call this timer flight. And now that's done, that is your flight timer. Persistent, we don't want it to be persistent. Yes, let us know when 1 minute is up by checking the minute call. Alright, so now for timer 2, we want the timer 2 to be an overall total of how much we've flown the model. I just like to keep track of this. I think it's fun to see how long you've flown the model for. Leave this alone. Leave this alone. Let's call this one total now. Okay, so now the total has been set and our timer is set to THS for an exact second counter. We're going to change this to persistent because we want it to stay. Reset that if it's reset manually. Don't bother with a minute call because we're not going to deal with that. No countdown. So now we go all the way down to... Alright, so now because I'm using the built-in receiver, you always want to make sure that this is set to D16. I have the FrSky XM Plus. If you have the BNF version, this is what you want as well because it is similar. So make sure your internal RF is set to D16. The default setting is already configured for that. Failsafe mode. You want your failsafe mode to be set to no pulses. You never want to set it to hold. That's almost always wrong when you're trying to configure your quadcopter because we want this thing to just drop if it loses connection with the transmitter for safety reasons. And that should be it for the first page of configuration. So now we're actually going to just go ahead and hit this page button. And we're going to go past heli setup. We're going to go past the, well, actually, we could configure the flight modes. Okay, so the flight mode titles. I'm going to input our flight modes. First, we're going to put angle mode. All right, so now flight mode 0 is configured to angle mode. Now we're going to configure flight mode 1. And call that horizon mode. Now once you have the horizon mode set, this is part of deciding our flight mode switch. This is going to be my flight mode switch. And this switch right here, when it's in the center, is going to indicate horizon. And we will set that up later, but that's what I'm configuring it for. So this is going to be our flight mode switch, and therefore I'm configuring our flight modes to be based on this switch. So horizon is set to the SE switch being in the middle. And now we can move on to the final flight mode, Acro. And again, we're going to go to our switch SE and push it all the way down because that will indicate Acro mode. Alright, so now we're going to exit out of the flight mode 2 switch and go on to the next page. Now this is our input setup. This is where we're going to set up our mode switch, our arm and disarm, and our beeper switch. So now let's do our mode switch first. So here's the input name. I selected input 5. So we're going to give this a title, very similar to other stuff. So let's just kind of breeze through that. Now that we have our input named mode, we can scroll down and choose the source for this input. Now what's our source going to be? It's going to be this switch up here, SE, the one we just assigned earlier for our flight mode title switch. So all you have to do is give it a flick. Now if you wanted, you could set this up a different way. You could have set up the flight mode switch to be on this switch if you wanted. But I like this switch, so this is what we're going with in this tutorial. It's up to you if you want to change this up later on. That's what we're working with for now. So let's hit enter and exit, and now we're back in the inputs. So now let's set up the arming switch. This is for us to arm the quadcopter. And we'll go to our source. Our source is going to be this switch back here. And this will be on, and that'll be off. So we're just going to set that SF, switch SF, for our arming. And we're done here. We can exit. And finally, we're going to set up our beeper switch. So I'm going to call this beep. This is for the lost model alarm. Now we've got our title beep set up, very similar to the rest. Now for the beeper switch, I'm just going to pick this switch. Really don't need a 3-position switch for it because we just want to activate the lost model alarm no matter what. With the on and off, it's really a 2-setting switch, but I'm just going to go ahead and use this switch because it's here. So SD will be what we'll use to trigger the on and off for the lost model alarm for our Furibee. Alright, so now that we've got our inputs all set up, we've got the mode, the arm, the beep. Now we've got to do the channel assignments for these individual inputs. So now the next page is the mixer page, and this is where we'll use channel 5, 6, and 7 to set all this up. So channel 5 is going to be our modes. Now this is pretty much a matter of inputting the titles for all of them, because as you click them, it's going to already have your input conveniently there for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this mode for channel 5. And done with that. Mode for channel 5. And done with that. Arm for channel 6. And beep for channel 7. So literally that's all I did. I went into each of these channels to set them up, and I lined them up with our inputs on the previous page. By the way, you can always go back a previous page by holding down on the page button. Okay, so now we're going to create a special function to reset the timer. And that would be to use this momentary switch back here to reset the timer. So there's a lot you can do with special functions. This is really a basic kind of thing. So we're going to pick switches. We're going to tap the switch, SH down, and hit enter, hold it. Now what we want to do is we want to have a reset. We're going to reset timer 1, and we want to click that to be checked. So now we're actually done with the Taranis setup here. Our flight modes are all here. This timer, we should have 2 timers set up. So we have our flight timer. Let me reset it. So we actually have our flight timer that's triggered when we throttle. As you can see, it's counting down now. We have our total flight time overall during the life of the model right there. If we want to reset the timer, we can flip this switch. And pretty much everything is set up now. The only thing we're missing is the voice commands. So let me hop into my other profile so you can see the voice activation. All right, so now we're back in my main profile. Let me go to page and go to menu, go to page. And we're going to go all the way to the last page where I have more special functions. Now, as you can see, I've got a whole bunch of tracks set to play, very similar to what we did with the timer. You just want to go through, and when SE is up, play angle mode. When SE is in the middle, play horizon. I also have the on and off switch to indicate when it's on or off. And pretty much that's all you have to do is just copy these special functions exactly as I have shown. Now if you wanted to also make this a little prettier, you can see I have this quadcopter icon here, which is one thing we didn't do. If we go to the menu, we go to page, you can see right here, this is the model image, and you could select from a huge list of available of model images. I like this little quad one that comes with it, so that's what I've picked. And now you are ready to go ahead and bind this to your quadcopter, and we'll configure Betaflight. So in the next half of this video, we're going to configure Betaflight, and we'll see how this all works with the Taranis, and we will test our failsafe. So you're almost ready to go with your Furibee Fuuton 200 at this point. Now, before we can even think about working on this on the computer and binding it to the receiver, safety first. Take the props off. This is an M5 nut. This is a little mini nut remover. Take all these props off. So we can easily do that right here. No big deal. The 2 nuts here, the silver ones, you would unscrew the way you would normally do it. Now these nuts you would actually turn clockwise to get off. And there we have it, props are removed. Thank you for taking the time to do the safe thing and removing your props before you configure your flight modes on the computer in Betaflight, or try testing a bind with Taranis. Now we're ready to bind our receiver to our Taranis radio. So to bind a receiver is really simple. Now first I want to go over where the receiver is on this particular quadcopter. This is my little receiver here. So I have the FrSky XM Plus set up on this board here, and we are ready to bind. There's a little bind button there. If I hold it down with my fingers while I am turning on the quad, you might need to hold that. Now this is pre-bound. I already bound it because it is a little difficult to do for the video, but I will show you what to do on your Taranis. Page, first page, scroll all the way down, bind. And the Taranis will chirp and chirp and chirp and chirp. And while you do this, you power up your Furibee Fuuton 200 and press that bind button on the receiver. And with any luck, the receiver will flash and you will have bound your controller to the Furibee 200, and you are ready to start playing with Betaflight on the computer to configure your modes. Alright, so let's get a battery plugged in. We've got it plugged in. And now we have Betaflight, and we can go ahead and click the connect button on Betaflight to connect to the quadcopter, and we can see all the available options that we can configure in Betaflight. There's a lot to do here, but we're just going to configure the modes and the failsafe and make sure everything is working properly. So let's start by going to configuration and scroll down. You want to make sure that your receiver mode here is set to serial based receiver, spec satellite S-Bus, and that your serial receiver provider is also set to S-Bus. By default, it was actually set to I-Bus, so you'd want to change that, especially if you got the PNF version or the plug-and-fly version. Next, we want to go to receiver. Oh, you also want to just enable expert mode. Well, anyway, let's go to receiver. Now this is where we have the configuration for the channel mapping. For Taranis, you want to use TAER1234. Now I want to test that this is working correctly. You can boot up on the throttle, and the throttle channel will increase to 2000. You go all the way down, and it'll go down to around 1000. And you can again try the pitch and the roll, and all of these things should be moving when you adjust your Taranis sticks. So provided all of that is in order, those should be correct. If they're not correct, something is wrong, and you should probably take a look at this. Set RSSI to channel 16 instead of being disabled, which you'll be able to use later. And now we're ready to move on to the modes page. Now, to understand what we were talking about before, I made 3 modes available. There's air mode or acro mode, angle mode, or stability mode, which will keep your quad level in case you're new and you just want to get this in the air and get a feel for it real fast. You can get it. You can use angle. And then there's horizon, which will keep you stable, but will also allow you to do flips and rolls without fully having you in acrobatic mode with no stability. These are here for you so you can learn and move up. Some will say to start with acro, some will say to do horizon. It's up to you. The 3 modes are here for you. So to start, you're going to add a range, and all of the modes are going to be on what is aux1, as you can see here. Now this is the slider. The slider tabs are where you can dictate what modes activate on what aux channel. So for example, when I flip this switch to horizon mode is highlighted because the bars or the range is within that mode setting for aux1. If I go to angle mode, then again, I have the range set up between that. You know, you could even make this a little smaller if you wanted to. I just have it this size. And again,
horizon mode.
That's horizon mode. And now we'll go to acro mode or air mode. So here's air mode. Again, that's all you need to do is just adjust these sliders after you add the range. And aux1 is our channel. aux1 is our channel 5 if you remember rightly, going back to our channel settings. So that's what we've configured. So once that's finished, you're going to add an arming range. Now the arming range will be on aux2, and it's pretty straightforward. You just want to set it in between as I've shown, and when you flip the arm switch,
on horizon mode.
Oh, you do need to have the throttle all the way down. That's a safety feature. And then when you flip the switch, it'll arm. You see, our quadcopter's on now. Okay, and now we will turn it off, and then the arm will unhighlight in Betaflight. So that's how you know you've configured your arming switch correctly.
Off.
Finally, if we scroll down a little bit, we have a similar switch to the arming switch. It's called the beeper. And this is so you can flick the SD switch, if you remember rightly, and it's on aux 3. It's on another channel, aux 3. If you flip that, it will beep, and you could use this to find it if you've lost it somewhere and you want it to just sound an alarm. You just flip that switch and you can go looking for it in case you have lost it. So with the mode setup being done, now I want to go on to the failsafe. Now this is very important. You need to make sure that your failsafe stage 2 is enabled, and you want your failsafe procedure to be drop. This means that if your Furibee Fuuton 200 loses connection between the Taranis and if your Furibee Fuuton 200 loses connection to the Taranis, it will just drop. This is the safest possible setup to do. And the way to test that is very simple. So, we're going to arm the copter. We're going to raise the throttle. And we're going to go ahead and kill the power. The quad should go off. And there you go. You're off. The quadcopter is off. If we turn it back on, we should regain connection again.
Throttle warning. Switch warning. Horizon mode.
There you go. Alright, so now... So we have connection again to the copter. So that our failsafe is working properly now. So there's really not much left to this. You're pretty much ready to take this to the field now and enjoy a flight. That's all there is to configuring the Taranis and Betaflight to work with your Furibee Fuuton. You've got all 3 flight modes. You've got all 3 of the good flight modes to have for this. You've got a failsafe, and you've got a beeper along with a reset timer, all on your radio now, and you are ready to fly. So get out there, go fly, and as always, have a great day, guys. Alright, here we go. Maiden Flight, Furibee Fuuton.
Horizon mode. Angle mode. On.
Alright, let's do a punch out. Whoa! Ho-ho! Let's do that one more time. Wow, that thing is fast. I'm not even full throttle. It's so light. So let's do one more. One more. This time full throttle. Wow. Still horizon mode.
2 minutes.
Let's do a quick flip. Oh, sweet. Another flip. And one more flip. That's sweet. That's the Maiden Flight, Furibee Fuuton.